You'll notice it in their language, long before you see it in their actions. Because the heart is slow to move, slow to admit, slow to change. But the tongue slips. It reveals the change before the person is ready to actually become it. They'll say things by accident, little phrases, different tone, unexpected softness, a shift in how they speak to you. Not because they plan to, not because they're ready to come closer, but because their feelings are evolving faster than their defenses can catch. People don't confess with actions first, they confess with language. Their heart begins in silence, then leaks through their words, then finally transforms how they show up. That is the order. Words change first, their heart follows later. And you've seen this with someone who once kept you at arm's length, who acted like they didn't feel anything, who had every reason to stay guarded, detached, distant. Then suddenly, they speak differently. Not dramatic, not poetic, not a full confession, just subtle shifts. Be safe instead of okay. Uh, Tell me when you get home. Let me know if you need anything. Uh, I didn't realize that mattered to you. These are cracks in the emotional armor. They are not love. Not yet. But they are the beginning of it. Because when a heart begins to care, the mouth stops pretending it doesn't, and it starts showing up in micro expressions of language. Here's the truth most people miss. It's not the big sentences you should watch for. It's the small ones, the accidental ones, the ones that escape when they forget to guard themselves. Because love doesn't start as a confession. Love starts as a slip. Love starts as a change in tone, a softer delivery, a longer reply, a calmer response to conflict. Where once they were defensive, now they listen. Where once they avoided depth, now they ask real questions. Where once they spoke with distance, now they speak like you matter. These shifts aren't random. They're internal movements of the heart, made visible through language. This is how emotions reveal themselves before someone is ready to act on them. And the most powerful part? These shifts usually happen when they think you're not paying attention. Because the truth is, they don't even notice they're changing. Their subconscious speaks first. Their words become warmer first. Their guard lowers through language before their actions fully align. This is why you feel it. Before you see proof, you hear the change. You sense the change. You catch the moment. Their tone no longer matches their walls. You hear the affection, even if they refuse to admit it yet. You hear the attachment, even if they don't understand it yet. You hear the shift in emotional investment, long before they can say, I care. You'll notice their voice slows down. When talking to you, they don't rush. They don't cut the conversation short. They don't dodge the feelings as aggressively as before. They begin to ask questions like, how have you been really? What did that mean for you? Are you okay? What do you need? These aren't casual questions. These aren't polite. These are invitations. Invitations into their inner world. Invitations for you to stay. Invitations for connection they swore they didn't want. Even avoidance cracks eventually. Even fear confesses eventually. Not in the way you expect. Not with fireworks or grand gestures, but with words, with tiny linguistic betrayals of a heart that said it was done. You'll notice something else too. Their language stops fighting you, stops pushing you away, stops filtering everything through distrust. They stop saying things to protect themselves and start saying things to protect you. They soften. They care. They choose words that don't wound. They correct themselves when they realize they did. They say, I didn't mean it like that. They say, I want to understand. They say, that wasn't fair of me. That is emotional responsibility in development. That is a heart learning to love safely. That is change. And yes, sometimes their words change before their actions do. Because actions require vulnerability. Actions require consistency. Actions require embodiment. Actions make everything real. Words are safer. Words are trial runs. Words are emotional rehearsal. They say it first, and later, they learn how to live it. This is why you shouldn't ignore subtle shifts. Why you shouldn't dismiss the small signals. Why you shouldn't assume nothing is happening just because nothing is official. Love doesn't arrive fully formed. It emerges in fragments. Their tone changes, then their phrasing, then their emotional listening, then their vulnerability, then their accountability, then their consistency, one layer at a time, one word at a time. The heart follows slowly. Because the heart is scared, words lead. Because words are brave enough to go first. So if you're hearing the shift, if their language toward you sounds different than it used to, pay attention. Not because you should cling to potential, not because words alone are enough, but because language is the first doorway to emotional truth. It means something is unfolding, whether they understand it yet or not. Love whispers before it declares. And right now, their words are whispering to you. The question is, are you listening? You don't always notice the shift at first, because it rarely starts with an apology, or a confession, or a moment where they suddenly drop their guard and admit everything they've been holding back. No, it starts in tiny ways. The way their tone softens, even when their words stay the same. The way they pause longer before they answer. The way they ask questions they never cared to ask before. The words change first, subtly, quietly, almost as if their heart is speaking in code, while their ego tries to translate it into something safe. They might start saying things like, I hope you're doing okay, instead of, why did you stop talking to me? Or, I've been thinking about a lot lately, instead of, I've been thinking about you. Or, you didn't deserve how things ended, instead of, I messed up, I lost you. And this is important. Their heart wants to reconnect, but their pride wants to stay protected. So the words become halfway truths, statements that sound casual, but carry emotional meaning underneath. They want to open up without admitting vulnerability. They want to reach out without looking like they're reaching back. They want to show regret without saying, I regret losing you. This is the phase where they test the water, where they try to see if you'll still respond, if you'll still care, if you'll still hold space for them emotionally. Not because they suddenly became mature overnight, but because emotional realization doesn't arrive in full sentences. It arrives in fragments. Their messages might shift from dry to thoughtful, from defensive to reflective, from short replies to long paragraphs they'll pretend don't mean anything. Not because you changed, but because the reality of losing you finally landed. And the funny thing is, they may still pretend everything is fine. They may still act unbothered in public. They may still keep their guard up around others. But their direct communication with you, that's where the cracks start to show. And here's what most people don't realize. People rarely change first. Their language does. Their heart evolves quietly. Their words evolve next. Their actions evolve last. That's why the shift feels confusing. It doesn't look like love. It doesn't look like remorse. It looks like subtle effort, like they're trying, but not fully committing, like they care, but can't express it without filtering it through fear, like they miss you, but don't know how to say, I wasn't ready for someone like you. And this is where your response matters, not in a manipulative way, not in a power struggle, but in a self protective way. You have two paths. pull them back to the past, or hold them to who you are now. Because if you respond emotionally to the old version of them, they will fall back into old patterns. But if you respond calmly, firmly, and clearly, they begin to evolve emotionally. Because the connection now has boundaries. Here's what that looks like. Instead of trauma bonding over the past, you ask real questions. Instead of accepting breadcrumbs, you wait for clarity. Instead of getting excited at their subtle effort, you observe whether the effort grows. You're not cold. You're not distant. You're simply self-aware. And your self-awareness forces them to become self-aware too. Because what they're realizing now is, you weren't just someone to talk to. You were someone who reflected who they could become. And that scares people, not because they don't want connection, but because connection with you requires them to step up emotionally, to be present, to be accountable, to be honest, to be consistent. Not everyone is ready for that, but losing someone who required it can make them realize they need to be. Now here's the deeper psychological part. When someone begins changing their language, it means their internal narrative is shifting. They're not thinking of you as an option, a distraction, a temporary comfort. They're thinking in terms of meaning, impact, loss, reflection. That's why they start speaking differently, because their internal dialogue evolved. This might sound like, I didn't realize how much I projected, or I've been thinking about how I respond when I'm overwhelmed, or I used to shut down because I didn't feel safe being seen. These aren't random statements. These are emotional confessions in disguise. But listen, words are not transformation. Words are the signal. That transformation might begin. Your job isn't to cling to their shift. It's to see whether the shift keeps growing. Because someone who's genuine doesn't just talk differently. They behave differently. They show up differently. They make effort instead of excuses. They take responsibility instead of deflecting. They choose transparency instead of silence. They don't just return, they evolve. And the shift you're seeing right now is the doorway to that evolution, not the proof. The beginning, the moment their words soften, is the moment their heart begins to wake up. The moment their tone shifts is the moment their regret turns to awareness. The moment they stop speaking from ego and start speaking from pain is the moment healing begins, not just for them, but for the space between you. But here's the question. Will you let them return to the version of you they left? Or will you stay aligned with the version of you that grew in their absence? Because your growth is what forces their growth to continue. If they return to a healed version of you, they can no longer play the role they once did. They must step into someone new, or step out of your life completely. And this is where you hold the real power. You don't need to teach them a lesson. You don't need to punish them. You don't need to prove you've moved on. Your growth is the lesson. Your peace is the boundary. Your standards are the closure. And whether they rise to meet you or fade into who they used to be says everything about who they're becoming. Their words are shifting. Their awareness is changing. Now the question becomes, will their actions follow? Because when words change first, the heart isn't far behind. But not everyone has the courage to follow their heart once it wakes up. So now comes the stage. Most people misunderstand because once their words begin to shift, once their messages start to carry more softness, more pauses, more meaning, you might think the heart shift will follow quickly, but it doesn't. This is the messy middle, the space between how they feel and what they're ready to do about it. This is where they wobble, where they inch closer, then pull back, where they open their heart at 2 a.m., then act distant the next morning, where they send a vulnerable message, then disappear for days because vulnerability overwhelmed them. This isn't always manipulation. Sometimes it's emotional disorientation. They're not just navigating you, they're navigating themselves. See, here's the truth most don't realize. People often love you deeply, while simultaneously fearing what that depth requires. Because loving you means showing up differently, being emotionally responsible, letting go of their old identity, confronting wounds they've avoided for years. And that isn't easy. So even as their language starts to shift, their actions may still contradict their feelings. They may talk like someone growing, but act like someone afraid. Not because they don't feel anything, but because their nervous system has been trained to protect them from vulnerability, not embrace it. This is where emotional maturity becomes a mirror. While they're relearning how to show up, you're relearning how to receive effort without abandoning yourself. You don't cling to their progress just because their tone sounds softer. You don't attach to their words just because they finally sound like truth. You don't fill in emotional gaps just because they can't speak fully yet. Instead, you do this. You let their words land without building a story around them. You let their effort show without assuming consistency. You acknowledge the shift without assuming the destination. Because this phase is fragile. It's where most reconnections break. Not because the feelings are gone, but because both people slip into old patterns. They feel something real. They get scared. You feel them coming close. You get hopeful. They back up to breathe. You panic. You react from pain. They shut down. And suddenly you're not in the present at all. You're reenacting the past with better grammar. So here's what you do differently now. You slow down the meaning, not the connection. You let the relationship breathe, not collapse. You let their soft words in, but keep your standards steady. You don't ask for clarity immediately. You create space for it to form naturally. And here's the surprising truth. Your calmness is what allows their heart to catch up. When you respond without anxiety, you teach their nervous system that closeness doesn't equal danger. When you stay grounded, you show them intimacy doesn't require panic. When you stop solving their emotions for them, you give them space to grow into responsibility. This is how they begin shifting from fear-based connection to conscious connection, not because you pushed, not because you begged, but because you became safe without sacrificing yourself. And eventually, their communication starts changing again. Not soft, not indirect, not halfway honest, but clear, grounded, unfiltered. Instead of, I've been thinking about things, it becomes, I've been thinking about how I treated you. Instead of, hope you're good, it becomes, I want to show up better this time. Instead of, I miss how things used to be, it becomes, I miss you, and I want to rebuild from where we are now. That's not just emotional progress. That's emotional courage. Because now their heart isn't whispering through hints. It's speaking in complete sentences. But here's the part people miss. Their emotional shift isn't a gift to you. It's a responsibility to themselves. They're not becoming honest to win you back. They're becoming honest because they finally understand themselves. You didn't just impact their life. You confronted their emotional identity. And now, as they shift, they begin to hold space for your experience too. Not just how they felt, but how you felt. They begin asking questions that carry weight. How did that affect you? What did you need that I didn't see? What do you need now? How can I meet you there? When they reach this stage, they move from self-reflective to relationally aware. They stop centering their fear. They start centering the connection. This is where emotional growth turns into emotional partnership. But still, words alone don't rebuild trust. Words are the language of change. Actions are the proof of change. And to get there, both of you need one thing: clarity of intention. If they're returning just because they miss you, the connection will repeat the past. If they're returning because they've evolved, the connection becomes something new. You're not trying to restore what was, you're creating what wasn't. So the question now is not, do they feel differently? It's, are they ready to love differently? Because eventually, the emotional shift asks for action, consistency, presence, transparency, commitment not as a label, but as a way of moving. And that's where we're going. Not with feelings, but with follow through. There comes a moment when words are no longer enough. Not because their words are empty now, but because they finally understand that love requires participation, not just confession. This is where emotional growth meets reality, where who they feel they are must match who they choose to be. So their language changes again, this time not into softness, but into ownership. Instead of explaining their feelings, they begin taking accountability for their patterns. It sounds like, I shut down when things get real. I'm working on staying present instead of escaping. I didn't handle conflict well last time. I want to communicate differently. I thought distance protected me, but it cost me what I cared about. Now they're not describing emotions. They're confronting behavior. This is the emotional shift that matters most. Because anyone can miss you, but not everyone can show up differently. And here's where you step into your evolution too. Because your role is no longer proving you're worth loving. It's deciding whether their growth aligns with your future. It's no longer, do they want me? But, does the way they show up support who I'm becoming? You're not waiting to be chosen anymore. You're choosing intentionally. You're choosing based on consistency, not craving. Based on security, not nostalgia. Based on alignment, not potential. Because now the story shifts. Their growth is no longer the center. Your standards are not rigid walls, not emotional defenses, just clarity. Clarity about who you are and what connection requires from both sides. So when they return with new language, you listen, but you also observe. You look for actions that match promises, behavior that matches emotional claims, effort without pressure, growth without blame, accountability without guilt tripping. Because if their words grew, but their habits didn't, that's not transformation. That's emotional performance. So here's your new stance. You receive their change. Without rushing into connection, you allow closeness. Without abandoning boundaries, you explore the possibility. Without guaranteeing the outcome. This isn't cold. It's conscious. You're not punishing them for the past. You're honoring the version of yourself that had to heal from it. And surprisingly, this is where the real connection forms. Not when they want you, but when you both want the same future. Because now, their heart isn't just following their words. Their actions are following their heart. They don't show up because they're afraid to lose you. They show up because they finally know how to love you. So instead of pulling back, when things get emotional, they lean in. Instead of confusing independence with detachment, they choose partnership without losing identity. Instead of hiding what they feel, they communicate it in real time. It becomes, I don't want to shut down when I feel overwhelmed. Can we talk about this? I'm scared this matters so much, but I want to stay. I used to leave when things got deep. Now I want to understand how to stay connected. That's not romance. That's emotional maturity. That's the heart catching up to the soul. That's healing in motion. And here's the part most people overlook. You don't grow so someone comes back. You grow so you never abandon yourself again, whether they return or not. If they evolve too, you meet in a new chapter, If they don't, you walk forward without resentment. Either way, you win because you didn't just love deeply, you loved consciously. And that changes every relationship that follows. So now ask yourself gently, are you hoping their words change? Or have they already begun shifting? Are you waiting for them to see you? Or are you learning to see yourself more clearly? Are you craving closure? Or are you stepping into emotional completion on your own? Because this isn't just about someone else growing. It's about you becoming someone who no longer needs to shrink, just to be understood. If they grow with you, beautiful. If they don't, you don't lose yourself trying to fill the gap. Either way, the love you carry doesn't go to waste. Someone will match what you offer. Someone will meet you where you stand. Someone will speak the language you don't have to translate. But the first person who needs to do that is you. So keep expanding. Keep loving openly. Keep becoming the version of yourself your future relationships will thank you for. Because whether they return or life leads you somewhere new, your evolution is not in vain. Your depth is not too much. Your heart is not waiting. It's unfolding. If this message finds you at the turning point, where words are shifting and hearts are waking up, remember this. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose consciously, and the right connection will meet you there.